Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the School on a Boat podcast, where I am a week late because I had an unprecedentedly busy week, but I was able to come up with like a bunch of more ideas during said busy week. So I think we're hopefully going to get back on track now. I'm currently sitting on my bed in my bedroom. Again, we're still figuring out the whole how we're going to film in this new location kind of situation. So I look especially interesting today. And also, it's another odd occasion where I'm recording during the daytime. Who knows? The podcast may be a daytime thing from here on out instead of a 4 in the morning thing. Oh, and also, my hair is red again. I don't want to talk about it. That wasn't the plan originally to to have red hair again, but here we are. It's all right, and it's been a while since I washed it. I dyed it, and when I dye it for the first time, because of the process that it goes through, I try to give it as much time as possible before I wash it again. And I've been wearing a hat the past like 2 days now, and tomorrow is wash day, or tonight, depends on if I get around to it. So I have hat hair. I have pretty exceptional hat hair this time around, so that's why we have a hat on. I'm especially in like Five Sauce stand-up cosplay today, because this is a hat I saw Michael Clifford wore, and then I immediately bought it because I am a stan in that way, and I'm wearing the Five Sauce shirt today as well. It's just what I happen to be wearing today. I didn't think I was gonna be this much of a Stan. But either way, how's everyone doing? Welcome back to the podcast. I have not many new random thoughts to talk about today, especially just because I have been so busy the past few days and weeks and such. Last week especially, I had family over, I had other requirements, I'm still unpacking. Like, I've just had so many different things I've had to deal with over the past week, but during that like busy kind of timing for me, I was luckily able to come up with a lot of ideas for podcast episodes. So I've really been filling up my podcast notebook with a bunch of different ideas. So we have basically the rest of the month of June planned out, which is pretty cool. So hopefully now I just have to like get around to actually filming said things. At the end of the month, I'll be at the end of June. That is, I'm filming this on the last day of May, and it should be coming out like early June. Um, the goal is to go on vacation at the end of June, and I have some plans for it already built. Um, and so I will probably record some of my stuff from uh, a vacation hotel or whatever, or at my father's home, because I'll probably visit him for a little bit for Father's Day, and then I'm going to actually see Five Sauce at the end of June. So classic timing all around. But anyways, to move on to random thoughts. This is kind of a stacked episode. I don't know how long it's going to be. I'm going to try and restrain myself a little bit because in these podcast episodes, I don't want to get too deep into things, especially into things that I know I want to make videos about. These are kind of more like tester, like hinted, videos for me to work out certain ideas that will maybe get fleshed out later, or ideas that I know don't need a full video on, or I don't really see myself putting into a section of a video, if that makes sense. And so they get the podcast treatment, and I can still talk about it and people can still hear my thoughts on those specific things. So my only real random thought of today is that I wanted to share that I've been watching the show I Didn't Do It, and I've been really enjoying it. So I'm only halfway through season 1, and I know it's one of the only Disney Channel shows to actually get canceled. Uh, After only 2 seasons, especially, most shows either never get picked up or at least get 3 to 4 seasons. So it's a pretty rare situation that this one was canceled. And I haven't done any, that's all I know is that the show is canceled. And I haven't done any research into why or how that could have been, but just based off of the beginning of season 1, I could totally see budgeting being a huge problem. I've been shocked at every single episode so far having multiple unique sets built and multiple different like gags and stunts that require a lot of time, money, and effort on the production team's part that I would not have seen in any show that was on this similar level. Like, I don't know where they're getting the money for this. Maybe they don't have it in the first place. Who knows? But as since I'm already halfway through season one, I'm already starting to notice that they're using less original sets. They're starting to do more settings in the high school or at the home, and I'm like, that makes so much more sense. Um, it just seems like this show has a wild budget compared to other shows of its stature, especially since it is not necessarily a star vehicle in a way that other shows were. Even a show like Good Luck Charlie was only like partially a stunt casting to get like Bridget Mendler to be this, global phenomenon or whatever. It wasn't full on like the Hannah Montana treatment, but it still did a better job of propping up Bridget Mendler, I think, within the series as like a contender for future success. Obviously, she just chose not to do that, so that's why Bridget Mendler didn't become a big star outside of Disney, because she went on to get a PhD at Harvard and work at NASA and stuff. I don't think she works exactly at NASA, but at a NASA-like company. But uh, Olivia Holt is obviously the star that they want to push for this show, but it is so ensemble cast driven, and not like in a sort of accidental way, which I have nuanced opinions on. With a show like Victorious, I have a lot more complexity with that opinion, but I really do think that that show is supposed to be a star vehicle for Victoria Justice, but it doesn't. It's not. There's not enough. There's not enough Victoria Justice. It's what's so enjoyable about Victorious, out of the very few things that are enjoyable about that show, is the fact that it has the ensemble cast, and we get to see all of these quirky, unique characters interacting with each other. And I just think that that's like the main appeal for I Didn't Do It, and I've been absolutely loving the ensemble cast of I Didn't Do It. It's one of my favorite things in all of media is ensemble casts. It's like an easy write-off for me. But the thing about that is that it has to be done well. I get infuriated when an ensemble cast is not done well. This was one of my biggest critiques of a lot of the early era DCOMs. Like, Phantom of the Megaplex was a big example of that. I was so hyped for that movie when we started it out with the opening narration of all the different characters, like, and their different personality traits, and I was like, oh, I can't wait to see this like Adventureland style decom where we see these teens working at this megaplex on a big scary day, and then of course there's a ghost. It's someone playing a Scooby-Doo style, hijinks prank. And so I was so excited and hyped for that, and then the whole movie is nothing about that. And I'm upset and no longer interested in like what the movie is trying to do because of that. So I really, really am enjoying the ensemble cast nature of I Didn't Do It. Since this is, the Sweet Life on Deck podcast, I want to compare it to On Deck in a few ways, because I feel like that show is not an ensemble cast necessarily. It, primarily features the Sprouse twins, less so together as the show goes on, of course, but still, they are the main characters, and then we get the peripheral characters interacting with them in their storylines or being used as B-plots while the Sprouse twins have the main plot. And rarely will that swap. And of course, in the original show, The Sweet Life of Zack and Cody, it was the opposite. The twins were more of like the side characters, and London and Maddie were like the main plot of the series, which is why there's many interesting things about that. I actually have already pre-planned a whole episode on the details of the behind the scenes of On Deck and the Sprouse twins and stuff, because actually I have it right here. This wasn't planned at all. I don't have the sleeve on it because I don't like to destroy the sleeves. I gotta protect the sleeve for the videos. But Disney High, the book that I'm reading, they have a whole chapter on the Sprouse twins, and I wanted to talk about that in a future podcast episode. But today, of course, we're talking about bottle episodes, so that's the main meat of today's episode. But that is not an ensemble cast versus this show, which definitely is, and I think the structure is very, very interesting because of that. But other than that, I don't have too many like deeper things I want to say so far or yet. Maybe I can kind of hint at, because I already know I'm going to make a video on I Didn't Do It. This wasn't the plan originally. I never go into watching a show thinking like, oh, I'm going to make a video on this. This one was like, I've just heard interesting things about it. I heard it was an ensemble cast, and I was like, okay, now I got to watch it. And also, I'm an Olivia Holt defender in a lot of ways. I feel like she should have been in more stuff. I would like to seen her in more things. She was in a pretty well known show. I think it's called I Know What You Did Last Summer. I can't remember the name, or Cruel Summer, something like that. I Know What You Did Last Summer is that horror movie franchise. I think it was called Cruel Summer was the name of the series that she was in, and apparently she was really good. And then a while back now, people were talking about a Britney Spears biopic. I don't know why. I don't know if that's in the works currently or whatever, but people were talking about a Britney Spears biopic and who should play Britney Spears. And Olivia Holt was one of the people that I was only like partially interested in. Everyone else just kind of felt like weird stunt casting or just like out of place casting. Like we have the celebrities, like the current pop star girls who are like their whole thing is doing the Britney Spears thing, which of course makes sense and I don't mind. Like Tate McRae and Addison Rae. And so they were like, oh, well, they should play Britney Spears in a biopic. And it's not like they would do a bad job or that I would dislike that or anything. It's just that, like, it doesn't make sense, again, outside of stunt casting. And you need to be able to do all three. And I feel like Olivia Holt was the only person mentioned in the list that I was like, I would be very, that would like make me want to watch it because I would like to see what she would do. The thing with a lot of Disney actors that people talk about and complain about is that they have a hard time branching outside of the Disney style of acting, the Disney Channel acting style, which is its own thing. I think I talked about this when I was mentioning Ross Lynch on how his performance in Teen Beach Movie kind of broke my brain a little bit because at the beginning of the movie, I feel like he's not I don't I don't like his performance at the beginning before we enter the Teen Beach Movie. And it had me going into a spiral of like, well, what is the point of acting in these shows? Because I have gone on the defense for the Sprouse twins and many other people in Disney Channel sitcoms for their performances in the sitcoms because I'm like, it's a sitcom. They're playing for the back of the audience. They're playing for people who don't understand English well, who are very young. That's what I mean by like playing for the back of the audience. Like for a stage performance, you play for people in the nosebleeds who can barely see your face. So you're heavily animated so people can tell what emotion you're feeling even if they're miles and miles away from you in a theater. And so there's a certain level of suspension of disbelief you have to assign to watching shows like this. And people just don't have the taste for that anymore because of prestige television and streaming, and it's a whole can of worms to open up further, of course, in that sense. And so I don't have a problem with this sort of style of sitcom acting. I quite like it. I think it's very cheesy and campy and fun and enjoyable, and I like to intellectualize why I feel certain things in certain ways about certain things, and that is an example of that I don't really have super developed. Like, I'd love to do some more research into why and how I feel that way about these series, so that's its own thing, but I'm getting a bit off track here. Olivia Holt in I Didn't Do It is pure Disney Channel sitcom acting in a way that I think Ross Lynch had a lot of as well, and he was able to fully shed when he played Jeffrey Dahmer. I feel like that was a spooky moment where I really did see an actor disappear into the role. There aren't many moments where like I can see a famous actor playing, a real life person and be like, oh, I did not realize that wasn't Ross Lynch for a few chunks of time there. Another example was Kirsten Stewart as Princess Diana. That was another one where I was like, I forgot that I was watching Kirsten Stewart on the screen. And so I would like to see if Olivia Holt could do that, basically. But I don't even know if she's acting anymore. I don't know much about her current endeavors in the world. But either way, that was a random thought that just appeared in my brain. And I didn't think I was going to talk about today. Needless to say, I've really been enjoying I Didn't Do It. I've been really liking the series, and I'm excited to see where it goes. I am a little bit nervous in how disappointed I may feel once we get to the end of the series, in the sense that, like, how sad am I going to be that we didn't get more of it? Usually a lot of shows in their first season are still finding their footing, and it's really in their second season that they really start to understand what they're doing and really start to get good, like really good. And it's really sad to see that if that's the case for I Didn't Do It, that the show ended then, Like, I think of Zeke and Luther, season 2 was the best season, and then season 3 while it's not my favorite, it was definitely bigger and better in a lot of other different ways. And if I imagine the show just ended at season 2, I don't think I would have been happy at all. I would have been very dissatisfied. So I'm hoping that that's not the case for I Didn't Do It. So I'm going to try and, you know, mellow out my feelings, kind of measure my feelings and reactions, because I don't want to be disappointed when the show inevitably does end prematurely. So anyways, no spoilers, by the way. I'm not looking for, there's probably not much to spoil about the show, but yeah, no spoilers if you can manage it. But one of the big, well-known, famous things that I really enjoyed about this show is that it is essentially, what if we did a bottle episode in each episode of the show? Now, this is my transition into the main topic of today's podcast episode, which is bottle episodes. So, the bottle episode, as a term, as a saying for television, used to mean one thing and evolved to mean something else that can almost, in a way, become the antithesis of what the actual original definition was. I Didn't Do It kind of fits into that realm, because I was just talking about how the show seems like it's going way out of budget with every single episode that passes. And the initial definition of the term bottle episode was coined by the Star Trek team, as far as I'm aware, and the light research that I did, to mean an episode where they restrict the story and everything just to the sets that they already have built and focus more on characterization and character dynamics as a way to save money. Because a show like Star Trek, visiting all these different galaxies, they have a lot of, SFX budget and a lot of like different set budgets that they have to do and weave into and stuff. And so because of that, episodes can be more expensive than others. So to, keep things on budget, you have a couple episodes, maybe a majority of episodes, where they're visiting different planets and they're visiting different species and they have all this unique dialogue written in different languages and all these complex storylines. And then there's a couple episodes where you just scale things back. We have everything set on the main sets that we visit in every episode that you're not going to demolish between season to season or episode to episode. And you only handle the cast of characters that are signed on to the main series. No new special guest stars that you have to, write new contracts for. No extra background characters. Like, just ways to save money. A funny thing, once you start to understand how television works and how it's created, which I don't even know that much about. I've never worked in television before. It's not like something I have that much in-depth knowledge about in terms of like real-world, personal, first-hand experience. But when you start to read about how these shows are made and how television in its pure form is like a lower budget, is supposed to be, at least was back in the day, a lower budget style of television creation, of entertainment creation, a lot of things that are there that may restrict the storytelling capability can actually lead to other elements of it thriving. Like, a common example is how, well, we couldn't afford to have this episode be set in this location, so we just decided to instead have it fit within the confines of what sets we've already had built. And because of that, we actually created something better that we weren't expecting to be as good as it was. And so it was actually for the better that we did those things. Oh, I had to explicate as soon as I was done with that sentence. But anyways, yes, the bottle episode originally had its definitions in saving money, but as time went on to more efficiently describe an episode where the entire story and plot is contained within one specific unit. So it no longer specifically describes an episode that is, trying to save money by restricting the amount of stuff it does, but is focusing in on one specific element and only focusing in on that. And so that can sometimes mean that they spend a lot of money on this huge, big extra set, but then they only focus on that main set and situation. So, like I said, Star Trek is a good example of this. There are other sitcoms. I think the other famous example that I saw come up multiple times when I read some articles about this topic was the episode of Friends, where they're all getting ready to go to some sort of event. And it's all within the confines of Monica's apartment. So the entire episode just takes place within that apartment. They don't have to build a new set for a location that they're going to. And they don't have any extra actors or characters to hire, no new love interest or whatever. It's literally just the main 6 characters in the main set, and that's it. And it's able to have all the characters bounce off of each other and develop their relationships with one another in a more complex and interesting way throughout the episode. You get maybe different pairings that you don't see as often, and you get more interesting conflict. Like, oh, these characters are not normally reacting this way to each other, but since they're stuck in the confines of this room, this is the way that they're acting. This all relates to the Sweet Life on Deck, by the way. This is a Sweet Life on Deck episode. I alternate between talking about the Sweet Life on Deck and then general Disney Channel stuff. I forgot to mention that the reason why I want to talk about bottle episodes in relation to the Sweet Life on Deck specifically is because I feel like in season 2 of the show, they do a really, really good job of doing bottle episodes in this idea of they pick an idea and then they just run with it for the whole episode and that's it. And maybe to a degree, some of these episodes could count as trying to save money, and others definitely not. While the show does bottle episodes throughout its entire run, there's a lot of episodes where they only do like half of that maybe. For example, I think of in season 3, Das Boots, which is the episode where Maya, Zach, London, and Woody get stuck on a submarine that is like sinking underwater, and it's London's shoe submarine, so it has all her shoes that trails the boat, and they're trying to organize and clean things out, and then they accidentally get stuck underwater and are losing air. But the other half of the episode is also about Cody doing chess, playing chess, and Marcus, who knows nothing about chess, having to sub in for him so he can help out Zach and his friends, all that stuff. But if the entire episode took place on the submarine, and that was the main focus of it, and if there was a couple of cutaways to like the rest of the cast being like, where's everyone else? Then I think it would still count as a bottle episode, but because it is split in half with the A plot and the B plot, I think it doesn't count. And another example would be the Frozen episode. The episode literally just titled Frozen before the movie Frozen actually came out, so there you go. But in that episode, it is Cody, Zach, and Woody who go to a Antarctic research center in the middle of nowhere and get trapped there. They go there via snowmobile, and then the research guy that Cody wants to visit and the other two just come along because they're idiots and don't understand what they just don't care about what Cody wants to do. They just want to tag along because the plot demands it. The research guy ends up ditching them, and seemingly ditching them and taking their snowmobile, so they're trapped there for a week. But he actually was just running to get groceries for them to be a good host. Wow. But the other half of the episode is Bailey and London dealing with a tour of Italy, which is like the famous designer that London exclusively wears, and how he has retired and how she needs him to be making more clothes so she can wear more clothes because she wears a new outfit every single day and needs him to make more clothes for her, that kind of stuff. So again, another example where it's half and half. But in season 2, it's where it's in its prime in terms of bottle episodes. So there are 3 specific ones that I want to talk about, and they're all kind of near each other in the middle of the season as well, which I don't know if that has any significance or not, but the 3 episodes I want to talk about are in order of how much I like them, by the way, from least to most. We have the Star Trek episode. See, everything comes back to Star Trek. The Fairy Tales episode, and Seven Seas High. Now, Seven Seas High as an episode is one of the most well-revered episodes of the series. If there's an episode people think about that justifies the creation of On Deck, because most people say that it should have never even existed in the first place. Obviously, I disagree, but that's a discussion for another day, maybe. People point to Seven Seas High as the show reaching its most potential, maybe, or its biggest example of what it could have done for the whole entire series. I feel like if every episode was as well written as Seven Seas High, people would like the show a whole lot more. So we're going to talk about it. We're going to discuss what a bottle episode is and how it can work and how it cannot work. And how it can highlight when certain characters that are not as well written, how it can highlight that further. So one of the reasons why I like bottle episodes so much is because it puts the characters to the test to a degree. It forces the characters to basically bring out So the reason why I like bottled episodes so much, So the reason why I like bottle episodes so much is because it really puts characters to the test. It shows who are strong characters and who are weak characters. And of course, if a cast has an entire cast of strong characters, then it's a really fun and enjoyable time. But if there are weaker characters in the mix, the episode specifically would have a hard time finding things for those characters to do because they don't know what to do with them during most of the series, anyways. So now, when they're put in a unique situation, there isn't an automatic instinct reaction that the characters would have. Like, Zach Martin is a strong character. He's a horrible person. He's a horrible person and an asshole, but he's a strong character. We know exactly what he would do in any moment or situation. And because of that, they can put him in the most absurd of places, like in the year 3000 on the Star Trek Enterprise, basically, but also shaped as the boat from The Sweet Life on Deck. And you would know exactly what he would do, annoy everybody and try and break things. Now, that doesn't mean that the show actually does interesting things with that episode. What would be so cool about such a referential episode like let's put the on deck cast in Star Trek is that you could do really interesting and astute commentary on the thing that you're making fun of. And if you're afraid that the kids at home wouldn't get it, they're already satisfied enough by the wild futuristic alien space stuff. And so the more unique references are for the people who want to care more about the series. And I know this as a fact that like the kids don't necessarily they're not going to get unentertained by the more specific references because there aren't any in this episode of On Deck and people still really like it and remember it well, even though it is one of my lesser favorite episodes of the series and of season 2 specifically. Like I said, we know exactly what Cody and Zach would be doing. I don't know why I'm saying Cody and Zach. The classic setting is Zach and Cody. We know exactly what Zach and Cody are going to do in a situation like this. One's the nerdy one and one's the brash one, right? So they're going to be nerdy and brash. So their characters are well defined in that sense, but the actual episode is not giving them much material to work with, honestly. They're basically restricted and confined to that little panel thing that they built to try and fix the boat. And undefined characters, very ill-defined characters like Marcus and Bailey are paired together and basically do nothing throughout the episode, are not funny, don't do anything interesting, and are just kind of honestly more annoying than anything else. I think there should be some more references to Star Trek and maybe how an episode is built. Like, what is the standard plot of a Star Trek episode? And let's kind of riff on that. There's a couple of references, like George Takei is here, and they have the visual gag of when someone gets thrown into space, you know, when they get like loose in space and the character just spins around on a green screen, or a blue screen, I guess, at the time. Like, that's kind of funny. Okay, cool, thank you. That's like the one Star Trek reference that we get, other than how everyone looks, which everyone looks like trash. Everyone looks so bad. I don't know why all the males have the Spock sideburns, and there's no references to Spock or Kirk or nothing. I feel like there could have been more done to make it more Star Trek-y. Although I do think what they do with London and George Takei is very funny. I like the fact that they're distant relatives and they hang out together and they're the same character. Listen, that's actually very funny. And I actually really do like that whole involvement. It was a very fun thing for London to do. I just wish every other character had something similar in terms of connecting them to an element of Star Trek. Okay? And so, yeah, an episode like that really highlights how ill-defined characters. I talk about how Bailey nowadays has more definition, but it's really only in relation to her relationship with Cody. And when that relationship has nothing to do with this episode, they barely interact with one another, then there really is not much for her to do. Like, there's these very off the wall random jokes with her. There's a bit where, like, because their whole thing, Bailey and Marcus, is that they accidentally end up talking to the alien race that is trying to kill everybody on the I was going to say the boat, but on the spaceship that looks like a boat. They're trying to kill everybody. So they're trying to do peaceful negotiations and nothing is working because they're so silly wacky. And there's like this running gag that's not funny where the alien is like, "We are coming to crush you." And she's like, "Oh, well, could you give me some time to like prepare my lunch, do my hair, like take a shower?" And it's just not funny. It's like, she's not the kind of character. This has nothing to do with her character. Anyone in this episode could be saying this, and it's not even a funny joke to begin with. So why do we have Bailey saying it at all? Did we not think of anything better? Is this just what we landed on? Because it's a bit frustrating, and it really does her character a disservice. In terms of like her impulsiveness, which I don't think she has, and her intensity, which she has a little bit of over time as the show goes on. I'm thinking of things that like Cody would describe her as when we get like descriptors of who she is as a character. None of that is present in who she is. And I feel like that was a huge disservice on the writer's part. I feel like her competitiveness maybe is something we could have looked more into. She's constantly making bets with people from the very beginning, and she needs to, she likes to rub it in Cody's face that she is smarter than him and better than him at things, which is true, she is, but also it is something that he doesn't like that she does, and yet she does it anyways. So it's like something that she does in their relationship that isn't necessarily the best, although Cody does worse things. But if you want the lowdown on that, watch all my other previous episodes I've done on Cody and Bailey. I've talked about them for literal hours on this podcast, so I don't need to get more in depth with it right now. But I'm saying all this to say that, like, that's the only time we really get more depth from Bailey's character, and it's upsetting that outside of what she does with Cody, there's not much for her to do. And also, Marcus was never defined as a character. He shows up halfway through the series and then leaves halfway through. He's only in half the show. And outside of his tragic backstory, which then just gets resolved pretty randomly, we don't get much from him. So, anyways, the Star Trek episode is a good example of a bottle episode in terms of how it's constructed. Let's have the entire episode be set in Star Trek universe. And let's see what happens when we put the characters on deck in Star Trek, right? But they don't do it well. It is not an actual good episode of television, in my opinion, and they kind of waste the premise entirely. So anyways, on to one that I think is more middling and maybe could have been better if it was more well executed. I feel like the Star Trek episode is pretty much doomed from the beginning because the on-deck team was never going to do anything interesting with Star Trek, in my opinion. Versus fairy tales, in this kind of situation, I feel like the team could have done better with just a few tweaks. And I've talked about this in my original video on the Sweet Life on Deck that I made already like 3 years ago now. Wow, crazy to think about. 2.5 years, because I started working on it around this time in the year, and it took me 5 months to make because I was bad at making videos back then, which everyone is when they first start out. So I cut myself some slack. But that video didn't come out until October. But I started working on it in the late spring, early summer. But anyways, yeah. 3-year-old video at this point. I discussed the fairy tales episode, and I discussed bottle episodes in that video. And I said how the bottle episode of the fairy tales episode could have worked better. It could have been something a little bit more interesting, a little bit more meta, and I would have enjoyed it. Because we've done the whole thing where the characters are in a play with in season 3. That was famously the part where Cody becomes one of the worst people of all time. And he's a horrible person, and he treats Bailey like shit in the play's the thing. But in season 2, we maybe could have done something similar. The premise of the fairy tales episode is that they're in Germany, they're learning about the Brothers Grimm's fairy tales, and they're, sitting in class, and they all get so bored that they fall asleep. And to be fair, a lot of these are bedtime stories, like told to children to help them fall asleep. So that kind of element's a little, silly, right? We hear Miss Tutwiler telling the stories, and then each character falling asleep and imagining them and their friends in that fairy tale situation. Now, what kind of helps a little bit with this episode is that there's 3 of them. There's 3 different stories, and it's a slightly more extended episode, so they probably just ran less ads when they aired it. If any at all. Actually, I think it's like 29 minutes. I don't remember the specificities on how the episode was aired. Maybe they aired like a half episode of television somewhere in there, like a Phineas and Ferb or something. But how the episode plays out is that there are 3 different fairy tales, and so a third of the episode is only dedicated to each one, which means that it doesn't need to be super expanded and complex. They can be quite simple, quick stories and quick jokes, which I think the show works the best on, is like quick, fast jokes that just breeze over you and give you a light chuckle, and then you move forward. You know, it doesn't need to be a complexly written show in that way, in terms of like wit or complex storytelling. It just needs to be fun, easy to understand, rapid fire jokes for it to work, in my opinion. So, the first fairy tale is Snow White with Bailey. The second fairy tale is, which one is it? Hansel and Gretel. It's Hansel and Gretel with Cody and Zach. And then the third fairy tale is Jack and the Beanstalk with primarily Zach and I guess Miss Tutwiler. I don't know. So this one is very interesting, and I think, again, like the surface level jokes that they make are fine. What I wrote down in my notes is that it's basically a BuzzFeed article 5 years in the future, or 5 years in the past, I mean. This sort of like classic millennial, let's make fun of Disney movies, because they're making fun of the Disney movies, let's be honest. I don't see anything too specifically in reference to the original fairy tales. Don't even get me started on fairy tales again. I made 2 whole videos ranting about fairy tales and modern day adaptations of them, and it's its own thing. Go watch my video on the Cinderella story movies and the Nickelodeon original movie Rags if you want to know more about that. However, but, and, Jack and the Beanstalk doesn't have a Disney movie, obviously. But I feel like the specific things that people, millennial humor especially, likes to make fun of in terms of these fairy tales are all present in all of these, you know? Snow White is asleep, well, she's knocked out by the evil queen, who's played by London. She's trying to poison her with an apple, but she can't find the poisonous one, so she literally just knocks her the fuck out and thinks maybe she just bludgeoned her to death or something. I don't know. But she's asleep, you know, and so Cody, who is playing Prince Charming, comes over to like give her a kiss, and of course she pepper sprays him. And she's like, "How dare you do? You tried to assault me," basically. But then of course she falls in love with him because it's Cody and Bailey. So we're just okay with it. You know, we're gonna critique it, but we're not gonna say that it's shouldn't be a thing at all, right? Right? Classic thing where let's not change the system, let's just call it out and lampshade it. But anyways, this is all just classic millennial brain rot humor. I call it millennial brain rot humor because it says nothing and it means nothing in terms of actual commentary on the original source material. It is just surface level, basic commentary. But you know what? It was new for the time. Like, it wasn't overplayed and boring at the time. It definitely would be now. And also, again, it's just quick, rapid-fire jokes, so we just move forward. Like, Marcus, Woody, and Zach play the dwarfs, the 7 dwarves. Well, there's only 3 of them, right? And they're just, like, really creepy and, you know, annoying and lazy and all that stuff. And so it's funny how, and again, they're commenting on like, oh, Snow White's only role in this movie is as a caretaker and a cooker and cleaner, which is true. That's astute commentary on the character. She doesn't desire for much out of nurturing and caring for the dwarves, or for anyone for that matter. It's just the dwarves happen to be the ones that she falls into the living situation of. And so they make commentary on that. It's like, listen, Toots, just cook and clean and you can stay here. And they're like making fun of that. And so there's enough, fine enough sight gags. They like put her in a wheelbarrow and they just chuck her out, just like flip her onto the ground and abandon her in the middle of nowhere. Like, you know, these are all surface level funny jokes, and I don't mind them. And then as for the Hansel and Gretel episode, little segment, it's my least favorite out of all of them. I mean, the Jack and the Beanstalk one is the least developed and has the least time. They don't even conclude it. They just have Zach wake up because they're like, I don't know, we don't know how to end this thing. Let's just wrap it up, you know, get it over with. And, but the Hansel and Gretel one is the least funny in my opinion. They make jokes about people getting fat. Oh, if you eat too many sweets, you're going to get fat. And that's, of course, what the witch is trying to do to Hansel and Gretel, right? Because they've been abandoned by their father, who's played by Mr. Mosby. And then they make a joke about how the witch needs to get a date. You see how all of these characters that we're inserting the characters into the fairy tales of, they all have like remnants of their actual like characters characterization, Mrs. Tutwiler is a lonely, sad cat lady who can never get a date and just wants someone to love her. And that's really sad and depressing because she's an old witch. She's, in her like mid to late 30s, I'm pretty sure. But they literally have her play the witch who is trying to eat children. And they have the conclusion of that story be she just needs to go out on a date because that's the Tutwiler thing. Same thing with London being obsessed with vanity and her looks, so she's the evil queen. And it doesn't work in other situations. They just literally insert characters because they need to. Cody's never seen as some sort of princely figure, but they have Bailey being Snow White, and so he's dating her, so that's the characterization, right? And Jack is seen as like a dim-witted or naive character in the beginning of the story, and no one believes him and his ideas and stuff. And to a degree, Zach is kind of that character. So fine, let's have Zach play that character in Jack and the Beanstalk. Whatever. Oh, and he hates his brother, so he hates the harp when he meets the harp, who's played by Cody, and all that jazz. So it's okay. It's okay. My whole opinion from my original video on the meta elements was that it would be funny if this was a school play that they were putting on. They were putting on like multiple school productions, and so the characterization coming through is like not in the script, and it's like kind of funny and quirky that like we're just supposed to do normal Jack and the Beanstalk, but because Zach is not committed to his role, obviously, because why would he be? He is rude to Cody, and he just makes little quips that he's not supposed to that are off script. And so that's what's funny about the characterization of the actual characters coming out in the production. And it's just kind of like with the fact that they all are asleep and are dreaming about these sequences. I just think it'd be more funny if it was actually happening in the world, but it was a play. Because it would definitely justify the cheap-ass sets and costumes. I mean, everything looks so cheap and like a high school, production that has no money. And so I feel like they should have just leaned into that further. I don't know if this was some sort of cost cutting measure to do this or not, because they had to build sets, obviously, but they all look very fake because they're fairy tales, and then all the costumes are extremely cheap and probably just bought off a rack at a Spirit Halloween or whatever. So that is a middling episode because I do think there are some funny jokes. At the time especially, it wasn't necessarily that dated, so it's okay, but there are some improvements that could have been made. Now, I think the best bottle episode that On Deck has to offer, and probably the best episode in its entire run, with 7 Seas High, is a perfect, beautiful textbook example of what a bottle episode can and should be. So, let's get into it. This is what I mainly wanted to talk about, and I've already been yapping for so long. This will be a longer episode, apparently. Okay, we're back. We're back into talking about things. It's been a couple minutes because I was getting very overheated, and also I was like, oh, I should prepare, some food for myself for after I'm done recording. And then I looked around at the absolute decimation of my apartment and I realized I need to do some cleaning. It's gotten to the point where I ordered pizza last night. This is kind of embarrassing, honestly. I ordered pizza last night because my place was so dirty and I didn't have any clean dishes. To be fair, I only have like one of every single thing. I don't have much of many dishes quite yet. I've just barely moved in, but everything was so dirty, so I just ordered food, so I really have to clean after this. And I just came to that realization as I was sitting in front of my fan, looking around at what I should feed myself with, and I'm not buying pizza again, so... Anyways, that's all beside the point. We're going to talk about 7 Seas High. Oh man, I left my door open. 1 minute. So I would argue that 7 Seas High is like sitcom royalty at this point. When it comes to famous episodes of children's sitcoms that people remember from their childhood, this is one of the big ones that comes up just because it is so expertly written. It is just very quick time with its jokes, and it gets most of, if not all of its characters down pretty well. And it really highlights the sort of like odd couple dynamic that some of these characters have with one another. So first, let's get into a little bit of the plot, if you don't remember. At the very beginning of the episode, Mrs. Tutwiler reveals that their teacher, she reveals that she used to be a weather girl, and for their next school assignment, they're going to be trying to put on their own newscast. and learn about journalism, I guess, and all that stuff. And it's going to be broadcast on the boat's network channel, which is very interesting to think about. That they have their own like antenna network that they create television shows for. I wonder if that's a real thing on boats. But anyways, so they are all paired up, and it is very funny to see how all these characters interact with one another. I had talked previously about how Bailey is not really that well defined, and they're able to work around that essentially for this episode by really highlighting the strong characterization of Zach. So they're paired together as co-anchors, and Zach just completely steps on Bailey and demolishes her at any point that he can throughout the entire episode because he's an asshole. And is kind of a bad person. But that is what makes him so entertaining as a character. We have the famous joke where Bailey tries to do some serious journalism and talk about current world events that are happening and explaining about how women earn 30% less in the workforce than men. And of course, Zach has to respond with the famous line that you already know, which is, "Way to go, guys. Let's shoot for 40. Like, let's try to get that pay gap to get even wider." It's very funny because of just how absurd it is, and everyone's reactions to it are just so over the top. Again, they're like so, elevated and heightened to where anyone could understand this joke. Uh, Here is Zach being sexist, and here is Bailey being offended by it, and it's sold very well through the characters. We understand Bailey to be this smart. If there's one thing we have defined from her other than just generic farm girl, it is that she is smart and well educated. And so this is, a classic example of her bringing up facts and Zach making a mockery out of it because that's what he does with everybody. And him reporting quote unquote, on the silly, frivolous things that all of the people on the boat are up to. And so it kind of highlights their dynamic a little bit more, where we don't really see these two characters paired up that often, but it's really funny in this specific context. And then we get Woody and Cody, with Cody being a field reporter and Woody being a cameraman. We see Woody's lackadaisical nature. He doesn't care about much about anything besides the hatred that he holds deep within him for his stepfather, Steve. Again, classic, very funny, over-the-top jokes where he's supposed to be the cameraman. He's putting the microphone on Cody. They're not ready in time, and they cut to them while they're doing it. And so, haha, funny, miscommunication, mishap, right? And then Woody goes, "Hi, Mom," and not hi to Steve, and is just very intensely emotional about Steve in a situation where it did not need to be the case at all. And so that's, very funny. And so we see Woody's hatred for Steve and lackadaisical nature for everything else in the world that isn't food necessarily, although that element of his character isn't as brought up in this episode, which again, it's not it's the quickest, laziest punchline that they go to for that character. And then we see Cody as neuroticism to the point of farce, where he points out about all of the bacteria in the pool and the jacuzzi and gets everyone grossed out, right? And the characters are so over the top and silly in this episode to such a effective comedic degree that even the people in universe think that they're doing this for the bit. But this is just actually how they are as people. Kirby is like really funny Anchorman style parody of a news broadcast that y'all did last night, and they're like, no, it was supposed to be real and serious. Oops. And then of course London is the meteorologist, the weather girl, and she is dog shit at it, obviously, because she's not that bright. And so throughout the episode, there's a little bit of a plot that's strung together, and a lot of it is like subtle, not really in depth, but still kind of somewhat commentary on the 24-hour news cycle. They parody the ways that news anchors will interject and bring up just the most random, absurd things during, broadcasts just to pad the runtime, essentially, and span a little quick anecdote into a whole hour-long news segment or whatever when they're investigating a cabin that, they thought was abandoned by a missing person that actually was just London as a way to as a guise for her to store more of her clothes on the boat, right? Classic scenario for this show to put the characters within. The whole bit about the knocking stick, all of these things. So it's a very well written episode in that sense, in terms of just all of the jokes. It's almost like they had a lot of stuff to say, a lot of jokes to say about like a news broadcast and anchor show, and they were able to do that very effectively. And also, the budget is relatively low for this episode. They just convert the classroom into the news broadcast, and it's supposed to look like they just converted the classroom into a news broadcast room, so they don't have to do too much changing of the environment. They use all sets that they've already built for the show and just kind of repurpose them. They even used that like lounge set, which had not been used since season 1, I'm pretty sure. So they had went a whole season, essentially like multiple episodes, without using that setting ever, and apparently they'd never demolished it. And so this is the last time they pretty much ever use it. So it would be easy to say that, like, oh, we're going to build a new set over this for a couple episodes from now, so let's just use it one last time. And they kind of like decorate it in a way, you know, to where it doesn't really look like that set from previously. But of course, if you pay attention, it's the same set. And of course, they use the same hallway and bedroom set that they have. They only have like the one hallway set and then 2 bedroom sets, as far as I'm aware. And then they just redress them based on the episode, depending if they're doing an episode where they need to be in Cody's cabin and Zach's cabin, or London and Bailey's cabin. So it seems like a relatively cheaper episode to produce. They're not building any new sets, they're just decorating them differently, and they aren't doing anything too over the top in terms of like extra guest stars. The only like extra character they bring on is Kirby, and I'm pretty sure this is one of, if not one of the last times he appears on the show. I think he appears once or twice more in season 3, and then it's pretty much gone after that. But he was already a recurring character, and so there's no extra speaking roles. It very much kind of calls back to that original origin of what a bottle episode is, which is something that is self-contained and focuses on the characters as a way to save money, because we don't have a fantastic, spectacular plot moving episode to do. An episode where, especially because a show like On Deck, they're supposed to be about traveling the world and all these characters learning about the world in those locations. They don't actually do any of that, of course, because the writers are extremely unaware of how the actual, world works and different cultures, and are pretty offensive to most of them pretty much all of the time. So in those episodes where they're supposed to be exploring different continents and in different locations and stuff, I can see how that gets expensive. So to just peel back and do an episode where they're just on the boat for the entire episode is a unique concept, and it's one that they only did every so often in the show. And I appreciate it. Honestly, I think that whole element of them traveling the world, since they weren't able to do it well ever throughout the show, I say it should have never been a focus in the first place. It kind of seems like a last minute addition to the show, because they're like, well, they're on a boat, so they can literally go anywhere in the whole world because they're on a cruise ship. So let's have that be a thing. And it was not actually a goal or interest of the show, because if it was, they probably would have done a little bit better at it, in my opinion. I think having these characters in a room, just bouncing off of each other, telling rapid fire jokes, is where the show thrives the most. And if it was able to do that within the context of, also being in different continents and traveling around the globe, then it would have been better for it also. But since it wasn't really able to do that as often because of just how offensive it would end up being, I prefer the show when it's in this more simplistic format. And so that's why I think On Deck, as a Disney Channel show, did bottle episodes the best and did them the most interestingly, I guess, in a way that I really deeply appreciated. Even the joke at the end with Boat Cop. Boat Cop was a show that Kirby had that got canceled. It's a parody of those very aggressive like reality TV shows where they followed cops, like, busting people and arresting people and, doing all these crazy crime things. They were so aggressive because of just how intense some of the chase scenes and like absurdly over the top a lot of the busting scenes were with these cops. And so they parody that really in a really funny way with Kirby and Boat Cop, which gets renewed after Seven Seas High. It gets canceled after only like 2 or 3 episodes, which makes sense. And so it's just really funny how they're able to show the different characters interacting with Boat Cop. All the different crimes that they're committing is really funny. Like Cody and Bailey snuck out late at night to kiss, right? Kirby catches Woody stealing crab legs from the buffet. Like it's all good, quick, rapid fire, funny jokes in a way that shows the characters bouncing off each other in interesting ways. And that's what I like so much about bottle episodes, because at the end of the day, characterization for me is what I care the most about in these sitcoms. The whole point of these sitcoms is that they're supposed to be cheaply made, quick entertainment. These are made on the fly, within only a couple weeks of production before they're being filmed, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with stuff that's made quickly and cheaply. That's the whole point of having such well-defined characters. You need to do a lot of work early on to make sure you understand what the show's about and what the characters do, so then from then onward you can have them interacting pretty instantaneously. You already know how the characters are going to act, and that is what's fun about it. It's fun and it's entertaining, and it doesn't need to be this like crazy plot with all of these interweaving storylines and such. It just needs to be enjoyable comedy. And I would say, for the most part, On Deck can do that, and also for the most part, it is unable to do that. But these bottle episodes are good examples of how On Deck is able to do that. So I think that's all for today's episode. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I'm going to try to get back to every other week of making episodes. I think I'll have a better schedule going forward. I was kind of working a lot this past week, and I'm getting back into the normal pace of things now, and I'm going on vacation, so that'll be fun. And of course, vacation for me is also doing a lot of video work, because that's what I have fun doing, and so I will be doing that, and we'll get some more stuff out. I got a decent schedule going for everything, so I got everything planned out, and I can't wait to execute all of it. So yes, thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and listening. It's a podcast, so thanks for listening. And I'll see y'all next time. Bye!